Okay, so this is going to be the last video for the series. This is going to show you how to export. There's two ways of exporting here inside of Maya. So I'm going to be taking this first one. This is going to be basically select your shape and go to the export selection. That is going to open this window, and in here you can choose the file format that you want to. In my case, I'm just going to be doing an FBX export, and I'm going to be overriding one of the images or Pokeballs that I had before. I'm going to keep everything by default on this side. If you're going to be exporting to a game engine, you probably want to change the scale factor. I will do that in a separate pass. I'm going to show you a game exporter option, which is really neat. So I'm going to say export selection, and then replace that. I will go now to my file explorer, and over here, as I have the textures inside of the same folder, I can just double click my Pokeball model, and that is it. Depending on the software that you have for viewing your models, you may or may not see the textures, and there's two things that are happening here. So first of all, I really like the Autodesk FBX Review, which is free, by the way. You just need to create an account and download it. Windows have a native one, so if I go here and say open this with 3D view, that is going to show me the model, but chances are it's going to come out with no texture or with a super dull color like this. I don't love this window viewer. I really prefer the Autodesk 3D viewer. But there's two things here. First off, these files do not contain textures. As you can see, the file size is 60 kilobytes. And the textures themselves, if I select the Pokeball base color, normal, and ambient occlusion and roughness, that is going to be 7 megs. So of course the FBX doesn't contain the texture. There is another way of exporting your textures from Maya and say include the textures on the file, but what you create is really sort of a zip file that contains both the FBX and the textures. So when you open that FBX, it unzips the textures and make a new folder inside of the same folder you open this texture from. So I don't like that way of having everything inside of a single FBX file. Some software is going to have issues reading the textures like that, so I prefer not to use it that way. I mean, it is an option, it's totally a valid thing to have, but I don't personally like it. So having them in these is also gonna let me just open the files in Photoshop and then modify them as however I see fit. And that is also going to be important too, because in here, this file do not contain, even if I zipped it up, it is not linked onto in the material in any way, this ORM texture. So what is this ORM texture? If I go down here to where my Pokeball is and I open this file with Photoshop, give it a second, it is a single file that is going to contain the ambient occlusion, the roughness, and the specular maps in separate channels here. So let's see, this is what I mean with this. The blue channel is going to contain the metallic part. So everything that is metallic in my Pokeball is going to be saved in here. The green one is going to contain the roughness. So everything that is scratches and all of those things, they're going to be saved here. And then the last one, the red, is going to be the ambient occlusion. So depending on the web page that you want to upload your software, your model to, or the game engine that you're using, you may need to have these separated. You can always separate them in Photoshop by hand. It's easy, but to be honest, there's also just like 2 clicks inside of Substance Painter to have them separated in the first place, so why bother? That is one way of exporting. The second way of exporting would be with the actual game exporter. You may or may not see the game exporter tab over here. If you don't, you need to go to Windows, Setting Preferences, and Plugin Manager. Then once you have your window open here, you're gonna have to scroll down pretty much all the way down to where it says Game Exporter. Oh, that was for the FBX, sorry. It's actually somewhat around the middle in here. That is going to be Game FBX Exporter. This is the one. You have to have it loaded and auto-loaded. So I'm going to be closing that. And then if I go to my file and say Game Exporter, that is going to be bringing yet another window that I open over here. This is going to let me export animations and other things that I can actually just do in the export selection, but this is way simpler to grasp. Also, this is going to let me modify the geometry if I wanted to do this, if I need to modify something to make it fit on Unreal Engine or whatnot. This is a great way of exporting things. I just want to export this selection. I don't want to export my reference images or anything. I will choose my folder, which was my source images. That's where I'm gonna save this thing, and I'm going to call this Pokeball. If I want to be using this for Unreal Engine, I need to make sure that my units are consistent. So if I enable this view, you will see that I roughly modeled this as a radius of 2. But this thing is working in centimeters. If I go to my Windows setting preferences and preferences, that is going to open my settings tab. And over here, I can go to settings and say, hey, you know what? Everything was modeled using meters. So when I hit save, notice how tiny my Pokeball is. So I'm going to change that back. I'm going to go to my setting and preferences. And if I want these to be a good size Pokeball, I will actually have to say good real world measurements. That's what Unreal Engine or Unity does use. So I'm gonna take this back to my settings and bring it back to centimeters. So linear centimeters. And if I want to, I can export these with a different scale. I can just click on this gear and edit the advanced settings, scroll down to where my units are, and I can say this is automatic, but I can say, you know, convert these units to meters, which basically means that you're going to be making everything smaller, or convert to millimeters, which basically means you're going to be scaling this up. So whatever it's your decision, it's fine. This was made in centimeters, so I'm converting to centimeters. That's why the scale factor is 1. If I wanted to convert it to meters, I will basically need to scale it up in different ways. So yeah, that is not really the best way of approaching it. Probably I will need to make my settings inside of Maya first to meters and then calculate the right size the Pokeball is going to have. But I don't really have the need of modifying those settings right now, so I'm gonna hit cancel. This option is also letting me use the FBX Review if it's installed in my system, and you can choose the file type that FBX is going to have. I usually just use the default and I'm pretty fine. I don't want to embed the media, which is basically the textures, and that's it. So I'm gonna hit export. Do I want to replace that file? Totally. That did open my FBX Review, and I can get to see how my textures are applied over here. One thing I'm not entirely sure is if this is going to be taking PBR material. I don't think it does. I don't see any options for having that enabled, but I can definitely see the reflections going on over here. So maybe that's a big maybe. I don't know. So I'll close this one up, and I'm gonna show you just the final Pokeballs that I made. Most of them are really simple Pokeballs. Like I just show you the Pokeball, the regular Pokeball. I also made this premium ball, which is really just the same color for that part, and then the band over here is going to be red. So that is my premium ball. Going with the same trend, I have the Safari Ball, which has a really nice texture here. With the PBR material, this looks way better. So this is actually gonna look like fabric. That's that. Let's see what else. I have a Dusk Ball, so continuing with the trend of Pokeballs that I didn't modify the geometry for. So that is my Dusk Ball. I have a Great Ball, which is the first one that I created in the speed modeling. So only those red lines going on over there. I have my Heavy Ball, which only contains a couple of spheres attached at the top. I also have my Timer Ball. So basic Pokeball designs. And last, I made the Netball. Right, so I hope you enjoy these videos, your series. Thanks to this website in which I actually use for the Pokemon models. This is a DeviantArt page. Couldn't find any reference on who made this image. Just find it in Google Images. So great appreciation to whomever made this drawing. And yeah, that is basically it for this video series. I hope you enjoy watching them as much as I enjoy recording them for you. So catch you in the next video series. Goodbye for now.